Hey guys, today I have my friend Brandy Anderson. Just thought I'd start out saying I met Brandy online on Instagram. I like Instagram for all the quotes and wise sayings and stuff like that. And so the more accounts I follow that do that, the more that I recommend it to me. So somehow I found Brandy through that, and I really liked her stuff. I liked stuff she was saying about Christianity and just wisdom she shared in general. Just thought I'd connect a little bit more, and so we got to talking, and then we had some video chats, and yeah, she's great. So I thought I'd bring her on today. Brandy, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and kind of tell some of your story?
Yeah. Well, my name is Brandy Anderson, and I've enjoyed posting on Instagram. That's kind of my outlet. That's where Kendall and I met. But I also have a blog, and I guess I'll just tell a little bit about myself. I was raised in a Christian family, primarily Baptist and Methodist denominations. It just never really resonated with me, and so as an adult, I would have identified with the faith of my family, but I wasn't really plugged into the church at all. And in 2014, I had a spiritual awakening that propelled me to seek out spiritual truth intensely. I had been experiencing a season of depression, and after months of just intense heaviness, I suddenly cried out to God. It wasn't a pious prayer by any means. It was more of an if you were there kind of prayer, where I just unleashed my frustrations into the atmosphere, hoping something might shift. And so within that swirl of thoughts and emotions, I suddenly heard a voice penetrate through the chaos, and it was as loud and clear as anything I've ever heard in my life, and it silenced me to my core, and the words were just, "Be still." And so a sudden peace just washed over me that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It lasted for days, even weeks after that encounter. I knew that it was God, but I had no context for what I had experienced. So I plugged into a few non-denominational churches over the next few years, and I spent time just sifting through the vast theological nuances of mainstream Christianity. Ultimately, though, I found mainstream religious answers to life's most important questions less than satisfying. And I eventually landed in a more contemplative space where I found a lot of peace and refreshment. There were still a lot of loose ends, theologically speaking, but there was room for mystery and grace, which allowed me to just hold the paradox of life with more compassion. And I guess you could say I had transitioned from a more conceptual seeking into a more experiential seeking. So I was just attempting to go within and find transformational wholeness in that space. And so I became interested in quantum discussions as it relates to consciousness. I began to really press into the view of reality as one singular consciousness that gives birth to all of creation. So to use the popular metaphor, the idea that we are all just waves in one ocean. So to see proof within quantum physics that the mind creates matter, not the other way around, and that we are all interconnected was really compelling for me. And to view myself and the world around me as energy that cannot be destroyed, only transformed, really just shifted me into a more open way of seeing and being. And I also became really interested in Carl Jung. I could sense that a psycho-spiritual approach was the only real pathway into wholeness. So I found Jung's work as it relates to the shadow and individuation compelling also. In spiritual circles, there is often an emphasis on killing the ego, which is just really spiritual bypassing. You can't kill the ego, you would be psychotic. But the ego isn't bad, it's necessary. And oftentimes in psychology, though, alternately, there's an emphasis on the material in a way that excludes the spiritual, and that also doesn't lead to genuine wholeness either. So the psycho-spiritual approach just really resonated with me, and I could see the way into enlargement or wholeness was through integrating the shadow while also viewing the ego as necessary, not something to extinguish. So the idea of integration and transcending the ego in a way that brings balance was just really helpful for me. And so that's kind of the space that I'm in. It's just like a journey out of the meaninglessness of contradiction, which is where I was in the months leading up to my spiritual awakening, into a more meaningful world of paradox, which is where the psycho-spiritual approach brings us. When we embrace paradox, we welcome mystery and grace, and we step into our highest path from that perspective. And so it was from this perspective that I began to study spiritual direction at the Hayden Institute. Hayden's psycho-spiritual approach really resonated with me, and I was primarily interested in the program for my own personal inner work. I had no real intentions of becoming a spiritual director for others. I just wanted to press more deeply into my own shadow and maybe gain access to more resources to facilitate personal growth. And I recently graduated from Hayden, and I plan to maybe press into Jungian shadow work moving forward. Like I said, my primary interest is in my personal path of integration, but I also enjoy coming alongside others on similar journeys, kind of to offer space for people to come up for air. I think that's helpful. So I'm just really passionate about sharing things that have been pivotal to me, transformative for me, in a way that might help others along in their journey of becoming. And so that's my motivation for posting on Instagram and my blog, kind of where I'm at currently, in a contemplative space still.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. What a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously a lot of the things you're into, I love as well. I want to ask a few questions that kind of flesh out some of what you said. You said at first you were in kind of a depression. Was that kind of like a existential wondering about answers to the universe, and you felt like the answers you had weren't good enough, or they weren't answered, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, so I guess it was definitely existential angst, and it was a sense that, you know, from the perspective of life is contradiction, the contradictions of life. Either we live in like a cognitive dissonance where we don't face that, we're really not paying attention, and so we live heavily from the false self, and it's all the persona image, and we distract ourselves, with all of the meaningless things, around us. I mean, all of society does it. But, when we begin to pay attention to the discrepancies, the contradictions, it leads us naturally, if we're paying attention, into despair, and so I guess I exhausted the limits of my false self. I had come to a place where, I had tried multiple things to, obtain happiness in my life, balance. And just like we all do, you have to, create that ego container and then exhaust the limits of it. I had just exhausted the limits of it, and I found life to be meaningless in that space. So I wasn't really, like specifically wrestling with questions of, like religious type questions. I wasn't practicing any form of religion, really. It wasn't like I was everything's spiritual, but I wasn't like consciously on a spiritual journey at that point. I think I just had come to a place where, my way of handling reality was not working well for me anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I've talked about in previous podcasts how it seems like a lot of people that have, these spiritual awakenings, and myself included, kind of first have a shadow awakening to how our reality that we know is incomplete, or there's a lot of screwed up things about it. And so it's like we hit a wall kind of, and just like, what do we do from here? And so after your spiritual awakening, you talked about how you tried a couple different churches, and just it wasn't satisfying to you, or previous way of beliefs about things didn't work for you anymore. Can you go into more detail about some of those things, or maybe the church services, and how you felt that there was some things missing in there?
Yeah, so because I was raised in a Christian family, that was just my perspective coming into it. I mean, my spiritual awakening encounter, I felt as though I had encountered God, And like I said, I had no context for it. And though I was raised in the church, throughout my teen years, I was disconnected from, I mean, like I had pushed away from. So, but that was the doorway that I entered into my spiritual journey through the Christian context. And so, yeah, I did. I plugged into several non-denominational churches over the years, just like searching for answers, existential questions, is what I had at that point, and trying to make sense of everything and really pressing into scripture to kind of mine out ultimate truth. I mean, for me, I didn't need truth to look any particular kind of way. And I think, a lot of people who are raised in the church, who are heavily steeped in Christianity, they need truth to look a certain kind of way. It needs to be wrapped in a certain kind of box. It needs to complement their life in a certain way. And for me, it wasn't like that. The experience that I had, filled me with peace, just absolute peace that's indescribable. And I wanted more of that. And so as I was sifting through all of the theological nuances and all of the various doctrines, it was like a cognitive dissonance, just the things within the church, some of the doctrines or whatever. It just really didn't strike me as truth in the way that it brings about wholeness and peace. Instead, it was very fear-based, and so, yeah, I had like it just didn't resonate. It just didn't feel like truth to me.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And so you go on and you talk about psychology and how you felt that added another important layer to understanding things and living out your life. What do you think psychology adds on, or how would I say this? Do you think theology is some people would say, why do we need psychology? We have theology. What do you think it adds or fleshes out?
Yeah, so, well, we're not just spiritual beings, so to just focus on spirituality, and exclude the psychological element, which is common to every human, is a fragmented way of approaching things. I mean, we are, we're psychological, we're spiritual, and we are physical. And so just like we need physical health, nutrition, proper nutrition, and a balanced diet, exercise, things like that to remain healthy on a physical level, we also need psychological health and spiritual health. And all of those things they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, they're all just various aspects of one whole. So it's both and, and not either or.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing why I like Carl Jung, and I'm sure you feel the same, is because he kind of, he acknowledges the spiritual and tries to get into that as well. So I think he tries to have a synthesis of both together, where some psychology might be missing more the spiritual aspects.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And that's the thing that really drew me into Jungian psychology was his psycho-spiritual approach. Jungian was very spiritual, deeply spiritual, and he had a lot of spiritual encounters in his own life that he shares. And he even communicated with spirits, and he talks about that and his view of what it's like when we cross. So I thought that was really interesting.
Wow. Well, that kind of leads to our next section. I know you have written a book and you're trying to get that published. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's in that book?
Yeah. So, well, I'll just kind of give the background leading up to how the book came to be, and my experience, kind of what happened. That prompted me to write the book. So as I began my time at Hayden, I was just really resting in the mystery of a very contemplative space. Like I said, I was just holding the paradox with compassion and curiosity. But there were a lot of loose ends theologically. I was able to allow those loose ends to just be there. And when I say loose ends, I really just mean that there are conflicting views almost every point of theology within mainstream Christianity. I spent years reading volumes, poring over the scriptures as it relates to various topics such as hell. I mean, scholars debate three main views on just hell alone. And then the end times, which I think there's like four main eschatological views that are debated within Christianity, and dispensationalism would be the most prominent evangelical position, on that. But the list goes on ad nauseum. So the atonement, the resurrection, the kingdom of heaven. I mean, if there's a point of theology within the church, there are conflicting opinions just swirling around it. So there's precious little clarity within the Christian church, by and large, especially mainstream evangelical Christianity. So, and here in the South, the conservative evangelical view just overshadows alternate views with a heavy dose of fundamentalism thrown in for good measure. So it's really difficult to sift through all of the theology, but that really is just conceptualizing the divine. And so that's not at all the same thing as experiencing the divine. And I had come to a place where the theological wrestling had ceased, and I was able to just rest in the mystery and experience the divine within all creation in a rich and meaningful way. So about midway through my time at Hayden, I experienced something that brought things into sharp focus with searing existential clarity. And I can see how all of my life up to that point was preparing me for that encounter. I was opened up to quantum possibilities in a way that allowed me to openly experience what was unfolding in a way that would penetrate, in a way that I could genuinely receive it. So my grandmother, who had lived until the ripe old age of 95, was fearful as she approached physical death. And when the time came for her to cross, she resisted in a way that caused her to become stuck as she crossed over, which created a portal where she was eventually able to communicate with us. So I should say that as people approach physical death, the veil separating the physical realm and the spiritual realm becomes thin. And this is why people on their deathbeds are often reported to have seen or communicated with those who have already crossed. They, sometimes they see into the spirit realm. They report having seen angels, things such as that. And at the moment of death, the veil, which has already thinned, opens, which is referred to as a portal. The opening is a portal where the spirit slips from the physical into the quantum or spiritual realm. And this is usually an instantaneous phenomenon, like maybe a split second, of opening. But in some cases where death is sudden or traumatic, or when people fiercely resist, the spirit can become stuck for a time, causing the portal to remain open. And when that happens, the open portal allows spirits to be able to connect with the physical realm more easily. I mean, there are still obvious limitations, but generally speaking, it takes less energy for them to affect the physical realm when there is an open portal. So my grandmother, compelled by great love and devotion, utilized her portal to push back into time and space in a way that brought a lot of healing to her loved ones. She reconciled with family members. She apologized for some things, which brought a lot of peace. She brought perspective and wisdom into some relational situations in a way that really broke destructive patterns in some people's lives. I would say she even saved some lives, like literally. It was really amazing, deeply comforting, and healing for those of us who were there to receive it. And I should also probably pause and just say that on the other side, there is no shadow. The full light of consciousness brings truth to the forefront. So, and because of this, people who have crossed often desire reconciliation with loved ones. Sadly, they're often unable to connect for various obvious reasons, but they see with clarity into the heart of people and situations, and they see the truth. It isn't hidden like here in the physical realm, and they desire to, make amends, to say the things that need to be said, to have a sense of reconciliation and healing. But it was from within this full light of consciousness that my conversations with my grandmother were able to offer such compelling truth as it relates to ultimate reality. My grandmother connected with us out of a loving desire to bring about relational healing where it was needed, but because I'm on a deeply spiritual journey filled with existential and theological questions, I made use of our communication to have conversations around what I considered to be life's most important questions. And most of what my grandmother shared just confirmed or brought into sharper focus what I had already come to intuit as ultimate truth, there were some things she shared that were not already a part of my worldview. But overall, her communication with me was a tremendous gift that tied up the loose ends in a way that brought me great peace. I mean, there'll always be an element of mystery. Life is by nature paradoxical. But having some clarity about the nature of reality as it relates to purpose and meaning is paramount to taking the journey into our highest life path. As long as we embrace illusion or cling to comfortable lies, or untruths, the nature of we violate the nature of existence and we suffer. So it's only from within the full light of consciousness, and when that penetrates the shadows, that we experience genuine freedom, real transformation. So I was able to engage with my grandmother in rich conversation that has brought a tremendous amount of peace and perspective. I talked to her about the existence of evil, the purpose of life, heaven, hell, the nature of darkness, demons, the devil, even Jungian perspective of becoming whole. We even talked about Carl Jung. So just a lot of rich conversation. And I wrote a book where I share some insights as it relates to these topics. In the book, I weave together all of these existential insights into a holistic perspective of ultimate reality that should be transformative for people of all walks of life. I mean, I'm coming from a Christian perspective, so it's filtered through a Christian lens in that capacity, but truth transcends religion, or tradition. So the things that I share should be deeply beneficial to people from, any tradition, any perspective. And I basically just offer insight into what happens when we leave this physical realm and how that should impact the way we live life now. My ultimate desire is just to bring a sense of hope and peace into the world, to share what has been so deeply transformative for me with others. And the book is finished and professionally edited, and now I'm just trying to iron out publication options. I have sent proposals out to a few agents, but if that doesn't work out, then I'll just consider other avenues.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. Very, very unusual, obviously. So I think some questions some people would have is, number one, was your grandmother a Christian when she passed?
Yes, she was. She was, I think raised in the Methodist church. I think raised in the Methodist. It could have been a Baptist situation, but her adult life, married life, was Methodist. Raised her kids in the church. It was a never miss a Sunday kind of situation where, where the kids got the little pins for attendance, where you never miss a Sunday or whatever your attendance. She attended Bible studies, that kind of thing. So yeah, she was definitely a Christian, a church-going, participating, active Christian, and she would have given mental assent to the idea that, if you pray the sinner's prayer, you're saved from an afterlife, in hell, that you go to heaven when you die. That was very much a part of her worldview. But I must say, though, that even with all of that, I mean, she had blessed little assurance because she was horrified of death. She really was afraid to die.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. I would say that it's probably that cognitive dissonance that we were talking about earlier. I think a lot of people they give mental assent. They have conceptually they believe certain things, but experientially there's a gap. It's like we say we believe this or that, but down deep in our depths, we're not experiencing that. We don't have the peace that should really bring if we truly believe that. It's like if you believe something, you'll live your life a certain kind of way. Your life will reflect what you actually believe. But oftentimes people, they give, like I said, they just give mental assent to a certain doctrine, and there's no experiential component to that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Totally agree. So when your grandma passed over, you said she got stuck. How would you describe where she got stuck? Is she in heaven or hell or like purgatory, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, so from what I understand, there's the physical realm in which we operate. We live and move in the physical, and we see things physically, materially. And then there's the spiritual realm, quantum realm, where it's the unseen realm, and those realms sort of overlap. So it's just not so when they overlap in a way that we don't see it, but it's ever present. It's always there. The spiritual, everything around us is spirit. I mean, we are spirit at our core, So when she
Right.
crossed, she got stuck between the physical and the spiritual. But in the sense of heaven and hell, that's, I mean, so much baggage with those words. In evangelical language, it would be like they're
Right.
destinations that you go to when you die. There's a place called heaven where you are far removed from physical existence, or there's a place called hell. And so I would say that those two realities, as believed in traditional Christianity, or that I was taught, that's not true. Heaven is not a place we go to, it's a place we come from. So when she crossed over into the spiritual realm, she just kind of got stuck between the physical and the spiritual. She resisted in a way that her portal was able to remain open. It didn't close. If you just slip through instantaneously, it opens and closes, within seconds. But because she was resisting, trying to hang on to her physical existence, yeah, her portal just remained open.
Right. So is that what ghosts are? Is that is that what they
Yeah.
are?
Yeah, so you see, like, you hear of people having haunted houses, or maybe you watch the paranormal stuff on television where there are haunted places. The paranormal poltergeist type activity is going on in those locations. There are portals, because when you get heavy poltergeist activity, things moving, objects moving, is definitely a situation where there is an open portal. And open portals can be caused by more than just when people cross and resist. People who are like into like communication with spirits, like Ouija boards, things such as that. They definitely can open portals, but in a dangerous way, because you're just taking a blind stab into the spiritual realm. And when you open those portals up, anything and anyone can pop through. I mean, it's an open door between here and there. And so yeah, so that's definitely what ghosts or hauntings. That's what it is. It's an open portal where the spirit realm is affecting the physical realm.
Okay. So how did your grandmother communicate with y'all?
Yeah, so about a month or so after she crossed, she found a way to turn the smart TV on, navigate to the search bar, and type words into the search bar. So for the family who first witnessed that, it was horrifying, to say the least. But that's how
I
that was
imagine.
the method of her, and that's how we've had sustained communication. Because in most instances, it's like that a place may be haunted, these things are happening, things are moving, but there's no real sustained communication. Even on these ghost hunter shows, you see people, they ask yes or no questions, and then they get like a green light for yes or a red light for no. It's very limited. But because she was able to type words, sentences, we were able to have like full on conversations. It was really quite phenomenal. After of course, after the fear and shock of what was happening subsided, and we were able to receive her communication openly.
Right. So I know you said, obviously when people use things like Ouija boards, it's just opening up a portal, and anybody can communicate. So how do you know that it was your grandmother communicating with you?
Yeah, so when it first started happening, initially I thought, or I was concerned, that it could be a hacker not something spiritual. I wondered if a person had hacked into the television, was playing a
Mm.
distasteful prank. I mean, I'm a very logical minded person, so I was like, we need to rule
Right.
out any possibility of that. In time, we did determine that it couldn't be a person, because the entity, whatever was communicating with us, was able to read our thoughts and know things that no person could know, that no one else knew. And so that rocked us to our core. We were like, this is definitely not a hacker. It's not a person, like in the physical. So then, then you worry:
Mm-hmm.
is it something evil? Is it a demon? Is it an evil spirit?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something not good trying to sabotage us, communicate, reach out to us? So, but we, finally, in the beginning, we would just pray, sage, tell it to leave. We weren't even opened initially to it being my grandmother. It was just something was happening that was frightening. And so the inclination was to just pray it away, cleanse it, sage it. But finally, I was like, what if this is our grandmother? What if it is her? So as we sat with that and allowed the communication to move forward in a way where we were able to ask questions and kind of discern, we were able to see that it was our grandmother because of the love and the devotion, like I said earlier,
Mm.
the health and healing that it brought to specific familial relationships, was just geared toward reconciliation and healing. And so, in fact, in the beginning, when fear was involved, like when she first popped on and said hello, and everyone went shrieking out of the house, completely beside themselves with terror. When that happened, the TV shut off and there was no more communication for like a week. If it had been something evil, it would have,
Mm.
just been fueled by the fear. Evil things they would want to
Right.
incite fear and
Mm-hmm.
dissension, and so all of the communications were, in love, clearly, and brought a lot of healing. Like I said, saved some lives, like literally.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Um, so I know you've said that not all your family is in line with this. Um, how would you say it's just like some people, obviously this whole topic of spirits and communicating with spirits is very kind of taboo for modern Christians, and creates a lot of fear. And so some of your family still is at that place, right?
Yeah, yeah. In the beginning, as we shared with, limited people, I mean, at first I had to kind of iron this out for myself, wrap my own head around it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
some of the people in our family that we did share with were, very tentative, as they, approached it. They said, I believe you, like I know you're not making this up, because people who know me, know us, they know, that we wouldn't just be making something like this up, but they just weren't sure what to make of it. And so ultimately, yeah, there are some people that are just kind of closed to it. They think it must be something bad, because they've been, taught in mainstream Christianity that it must be demons because your loved ones can't communicate with you. And, of course, there's no biblical precedent for that, but, they interpret scripture in a way and create their doctrines in a way so as to exclude that, as an option. And so I've had, I've had some family say, well, I have no doubt someone or something is talking to you, but it must be a demon, and I'm like, yeah, but, if it were a demon, it would
Mm-hmm.
be stirring up dissension and fear and, wreaking havoc. It wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
trying to heal relationships and tell us that it loves us and, that kind of thing. So, yeah, there are some people that just aren't open to it, and that's
Right.
okay. I mean, everyone's where they are.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I guess I don't want to get too off track. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about like saging. I know that's not a common thing that, Christians deal with or know about. Or,
Yeah. Well, in the more contemplative space, and like at the Hayden Institute, where like I studied spiritual direction, Christians do, sage. Sage is a part of, just another tool in
Mm-hmm.
the belt. Yeah, it's just a way to cleanse an area, and it's really the intention. It's not so much the sage. I mean, sage has a cleansing
Mm-hmm.
um, benefit to it, but, you pray and you sage, and you banish evil, release negative energy, that kind of thing. It's just, the intent
Mm-hmm.
to operate in love and light, and you set that intention, and it's like maybe a
Mm-hmm.
prophetic act, as the smoke carries the negativity out of your house,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing.
Right. I've heard it referred to as kind of like a spiritual protection or spiritual hygiene, almost.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Um, so what can your grandmother, can she continue on? Um, or is she stuck there? How does that work?
Yeah, so she is not stuck anymore. I mean, initially she was stuck, but she was able to become unstuck, or gain some perspective about her situation, or accept, the reality that she had crossed, and she was no longer stuck. And so, as far as the moving on, there are levels. Like there's the astral plane, which is closest to us. It's like the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. And then there are other planes of existence. Like it's vast. I mean, the universe is vast, and so the spiritual realm is also
Mm-hmm.
a vast space. And so our loved ones can move on. What they call they move into the beyond is how they would. That's how my grandmother would
Mm-hmm.
articulate it. But even from the beyond, like even our loved ones who have moved on into the beyond, and have a sense of um, like I guess their spiritual journey has continued in that trajectory, they still are with us. So it's not like here in the physical, it's not linear. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like everything is a
Mm-hmm.
spiral. So while our loved ones may be in the beyond, they are also very much here with us, and they are looking in on us. They are with us, and so yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
different than in the physical, where if I move on, I'm away from you entirely. We are separated. It's not like that there. But my grandmother is
Mm-hmm.
staying at her portal
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of not moving into the beyond, because to move into the beyond means that you're not
Mm-hmm.
able to communicate with us. They have to come through that portal. See, that's how communications would um, be facilitated. The opening allows a spirit to be able to slip back into the physical and manipulate things in the physical realm. So they have to be close to the physical realm, in proximity, I mean, if that makes sense. It's just hard to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these things are hard for our mind to grasp, and it's not obviously our normal everyday perception. Um, we've both done some research, so I think one way to kind of understand it is physicists talk about mathematically there are more dimensions than just the third dimension. And so, um, there's more layers to reality that are non-physical, and so you could kind of say that that aligns with there's spiritual dimensions, and it's a journey. It's not just, oh, you're going to heaven or hell or whatever. So I guess my next thing would be uh, if someone is close to their time, um, what kind of advice would you give them to, like, hey, to not get stuck?
Yeah. Yeah, well, so let go is that's the message by and large. I've, in speaking to my grandmother about this, I'm like, what are we to do? What's the path into enlightenment? How do we not get stuck? I mean, what's the key? And it's always let go. That's what she has said every time, without exception. So it is that idea of allowing life to be as it is, to be fully present in every moment. It's what, Eastern traditions would call the path of enlightenment. Jesus modeled it as the non-dual consciousness, where, you just, forgiveness. I mean, in the Christian tradition, it's called forgiveness. I mean, you forgive life for being as it is, and you allow life to be as it is in every moment. And you don't resist the inevitable, but you also don't cling. So there's a sense that you're not clinging to the physical, and you're not resisting the things that are unfavorable. You allow life to just flow in and through you. And really and truly, embody love would be the best way to put it. If we are able to live with love, which is our true essence, is our true identity is love. And so when we drop into that, and exhibit and embody that, we're able to just take the journey in a fluid kind of way without resistance, more in a non-resistance approach to things. So that's kind of, but some people, some people get stuck because they have a traumatic end. They're not expecting it, something traumatic happens and they're suddenly thrust into the spirit realm, and they don't know, they haven't been able to gain a perspective about it. So in that instance, I don't know that you could really prepare for that, but just maybe if you are aware of what's coming next, you might be able to gain some perspective about it faster. But yeah, I guess that's what I would say. Just live life with your hands wide open.
Yeah, yeah, great answer. So what would your granny say about heaven and hell?
Yeah, so I guess it's what we consider hell is like conscious eternal torment or whatever is not true. It's erroneous. But hell really is, heaven and hell both are just internal states of being. It's a way of a state of existence. And so we all would pass through hell on the way into heaven, if you will, if you would like to use those terms. But it really is a matter of wholeness, a matter of awakening into our invincible oneness with God, of being able to have that inner peace, that reconciliation of, the tension of opposites, reconciled and balanced in a way that we become whole. So, and we all pass through that. No one avoids that. I mean, you can't, and I guess that's probably the most important thing that I've learned in communicating with my grandmother, is that we take with us whatever level of consciousness we've attained at the time of our crossing. So when people have done their inner work, or when they have done no inner work, people who are living just entrenched in this small ego self, they'll find themselves stripped of the shadows and the false pretenses on the other side. And so they'll be fully exposed by the light of consciousness in a way that would be initially difficult and unpleasant, which could be, they call it fire. That's what my grandmother would say. She would say it's fire. But, I have asked her to flesh that out, and it is the full light of consciousness. It's not like a retributive, eternal, conscious torment kind of situation. It's just the full light of consciousness is painful to people who are really stuck in the illusions, And so for those who have done their inner work and are living from their higher self, their true self, they'll make the transition much easier. So authenticity is comfortable under the full light of consciousness, but the ego pushes against it in a way that is really, really painful. And so this is true in physical life. So it's why so many people avoid taking the journey inward and doing the inner work now. It's painful. It's easier to distract ourselves and not think about it. It's also true on the other side of the veil. We don't die into heaven, we awaken into it. I mean, Carl Jung said that unless we make the unconscious conscious, it'll drive our lives and we'll call it fate. So the idea that when people cross, that they float away into like instant peace and bliss, regardless of their inner condition, is erroneous. I mean, dying is not an escape from the necessary and painful journey of becoming. It's actually a confrontation that forces the issue. So like the mystics say, if we die before we die, we don't have to die when we die. So the light of consciousness is likened to a fire that burns away everything that interferes with love. The illusions we cling to, the false self we live from, all of that is incinerated in a way that restores us. So it's a purification process. It's restorative, not retributive, and it's very much something that we participate in. So it's not forced on us either. It's possible to resist doing your inner work even after crossing, but doing so is much more painful.
Mm.
If you avoid it there,
Hmm.
it's more painful than if you avoid it here in the physical. Here in the physical, people live lives of illusion and unconsciousness all the time. The collective masses are all asleep for the most part, living out of their false selves, posturing and pretending. And many aren't even aware of it. It's just like a default way of operating in the world, especially here in the West. But on the other side, the masks are stripped away. The unvarnished truth is laid bare. So resisting inner work on the other side is done under the full light of consciousness, and it causes more suffering than it would here. I mean, even here, here in the physical, resisting ultimate truth generates suffering, but there it's just intensified. So yeah, so the importance of letting go and shifting into a non-dual way of
Mm.
seeing and being is necessary for wholeness and peace, both here and now. Um, my grandmother shared with me that it's much better to do the work here in the physical than to wait until we cross. But the good news is that we all eventually do let go. Everyone is ultimately made whole and reconciled.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's really great. Is it, although I'll just say that it's very psychological language, so I'm going to try to say it in a different way, and maybe that might help some people. And you tell me what you think of the way I say it. But just what the journey is to understand how we act and how we affect others, and the ways we harm others and harm ourselves, but also the way we help others, and also that our identity isn't um, all these labels we put on ourselves, or these different say, yeah, I'm a Christian, or I'm Kindle, whatever. It's just like that we are a part of God, and that we are working towards becoming more who we actually are, as part of um, God, as part of the Spirit of God, and that's the name of my podcast. But once we're in the spiritual realm, we will see clearly how our lives, on the physical, what we did and how we affected others, and that is very painful, or it's more painful if we haven't acknowledged it here in this life. And the more we acknowledge it here and work to heal that, the less painful it will be once we cross over, and the more we can say accept that God loves us and forgives us, and um, live in our true identity. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. That's a beautiful way to say it. Yeah, I love the way you articulated that. I would 100% agree with you.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess just so what is the deal with people say, hey, this religion or this religion is right, and these people are going to heaven, these people are not. How would you reframe that?
Yeah, well, God transcends religion. And so I would say that there's truth to be gleaned from every tradition. I mean, every religion, every tradition has some truth to impart. And we all see through, we see through the lens darkly. We don't see fully. So we all have bits and pieces of truth
Mm-hmm.
to impart. And I would say that ultimately, everyone, regardless of religious beliefs or affiliations, we're all being drawn by God into an awareness of our oneness with God. So, however you come into that fullness of life, I mean, they're just doorways into the same truth. God is bigger than any particular religion, and the whole redemptive idea that the whole world is being redeemed. I mean, I would just say that yes, the whole world, that Jesus died for all, that it's a reconciliation of everyone, like every knee will bow, every tongue confess, that kind of, it's just the universal language that we are all being drawn into it in one way or another. I mean, all of life is designed to
Yeah, I
awaken
love that.
us.
It's such a beautiful picture. So, in your talks with your grandmother, this time I've been asking you a lot of questions. What has what has changed your mind, or what has she shared with you that surprised you, or kind of changed your thinking,
Um,
or maybe
well,
what's most important that you want to share? Because I'm sure there's a lot.
yeah. Um, I would probably say the thing that she shared that wasn't already a part of my worldview, the thing that I found, I won't say surprising necessarily, but it really wasn't a part of my worldview. Coming from a Christian tradition, reincarnation was not something that I had ever embraced. Um,
Mm.
I had thought about it, and I found past life memory accounts in children quite compelling. But coming from a Christian background, it just wasn't something that I
Hmm.
ever gave a lot of consideration to. It's just one of those things that I kind of shelved. I just set it aside, kind of as that's interesting. I'm not sure what to do with that. Um, so when she told me that reincarnation is true, I began to study it a bit more deeply, and so now I see that the cycles of death and resurrection within all of creation continually bear witness to reincarnation. It's as an almost inevitable phenomenon. But the Christian pushback that reincarnation contradicts heaven is really a non-issue when we see that heaven is a
Hmm.
place we come from and not a place we go to. The purpose of life is to awaken into our true self, to become whole as Christ is whole. And reincarnation is just opportunity to try again, to take the journey again in an attempt to fully embrace the physicality of human existence in a way that brings about that wholeness. So, according to my grandmother, those who are enlightened, which, like people who have done their inner work and have inner peace and they're reconciled and balanced,
Hmm.
they wouldn't likely choose to reincarnate.
Hmm.
Mainly those who feel they missed the mark in some way would want to try again, or those who are still very attached to physical life may want to reincarnate also. The point of life is to let go. No clinging, no resistance is the enlightened path.
Hmm.
So for those who still cling, the physical world is most alluring, even on the other side.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I found it really surprising and interesting when I started reading a bunch of near death experiences, and a lot of people that were Christians having near death experiences were like, yeah, I was talking with Jesus or God after in my near death experience, and we were talking about my past life and different stuff like that, and that after their near death experience that they just accepted that so easily, and that was just an adjustment in their belief. And then, thinking back to my own awakening, I did have that thought that, hey, it just doesn't. I don't think that we just live one life, and I just had that thought, and I never really considered reincarnation before that. So yeah, it's been a really interesting thing to look into myself. So you're saying that reincarnation is a a choice. It's a free will choice for people to do.
Yes, it is a choice. And according to my grandmother, it's not, I hear some spiritual teachers, some people in spiritual circles say that reincarnation is a choice in the sense that we choose, like, where, like the location of our reincarnation, like where geographically we reincarnate, or into which family, or who our parents are, and like that we choose all these details, that we set our reincarnation situation up in a particular kind of way to try to like manipulate a certain outcome, or lean heavily toward an outcome. But according to my grandmother, that's not true. The only thing that we choose is whether or not we do reincarnate. Everything else is a surprise. It's like we don't choose
Mm-hmm.
Where, our economic status, culturally where we will be, any of that stuff. And she says ultimately that those things don't matter anyway because the point is to wake up. And so we can wake up from any perspective, so to speak. She did say, though, that we are always, or supposed to always be, reincarnated within our same family or soul connections, family connections. So, like if I were to die tomorrow and say I wanted to reincarnate, I would wait for my family and then we would do it together for those who choose. Those who don't choose, they would just opt out. And there are new souls that may be incorporated into your family dynamic. If, like, say your mom decided not to reincarnate, but your dad did, you would just have, like a different mom in that cycle. But you can choose to reincarnate too soon. I mean, there are instances where people have not waited like they were really supposed to, and eager to come back. They pop back into, the physical before, before time. And in those instances, you hear of accounts where, like, where someone's brother had died when they were young, and then now all of a sudden they think, as an adult, their son is actually their brother reincarnated. So I mean that's kind of what happens if you come back too soon. You may come back into your family in a way that's too close. It's and it doesn't facilitate you or them on it becomes too complicated. Your highest life path is kind of impeded when you do that. You're supposed to wait. It's a choice. Everything is a choice.
So, now that your grandmother has passed and she's on the other side, does she know everything? Is everything clear to her, or how does that work compared to us here in the physical?
Yeah, so, on the other side, they're not like omniscient, all knowing in that sense, but they do have a clear perspective. They can see the truth, and they see into the hearts of people and situations. And if they want to look into something, they see with clarity. So nothing is hidden. And I know when my grandmother when I realized that, she began to share things with us and say things that kind of hinted at that. And so I pressed her, and sure enough, yeah, they can, like, there's nothing that is hidden. They know what we think if they want to, and how our motivations, our heart postures. So they're able to see the truth into any situation. And so I was like, that's really amazing. And I was telling my grandmother, I was like, that's so awesome. Isn't that amazing and wonderful to be able to see the truth, just to cut through all the illusions, all of the pretenses, and just like you just see into the heart of truth. That's so glorious. And I was thinking of it from like a nerdy kind of perspective, as someone who, I would love to know, is this spiritual teacher spot on, or are they just misguided, or are they malicious? That kind of, I'm thinking of it from that perspective, to be able to see with clarity, just to get to the bottom of things. And her response kind of shook me. She was like, yeah, I mean, in that regard, that's great. She said, but it's often very painful. And so that caused me to, pause and just kind of think about that for a moment. And I suppose, yeah, because you see, when you cross to the other side, you're able to see your loved ones with clarity. You see what they really thought about you or think about you, what their true motives are. Nothing is hidden, so it can be particularly painful.
Wow. So you're kind of highlighting that they can see clearly. I guess the physical. Can they see clearly on the opposite end? Like, do they have like a direct line to God and Jesus or other angels, different stuff like that? How does that work?
On the other side, they do still have that clarity. And here in the physical, we have a lot of like false pretenses. People put on masks. We present ourselves a certain kind of way. So you may know someone and feel like you know them pretty well, but you don't really know their true motivations, things like that. But we can be deceived by people. But on the other side, there is none of that. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
You can't hide the truth. And so yes, yeah, they do still have that clarity on the other side. As far as God is concerned, yeah, I mean, they would say that God is existence itself, that God is in us, and that we are in God. You know, in Him we live and move and have our being. And they, my grandmother encourages us to pray. So, I mean, it's very, it's not as though, I mean, she's very aware of the reality of God, that God is reality itself, and that, yeah, so yeah, they're able to see with clarity, both here back into the physical realm, but also in the spiritual realm.
Okay. So, talking about how God is existence itself, and then she encourages you all to pray. Is God actively working on our behalf? Is He going into reality and changing things, or how would you talk about that?
Yeah, well, so when you see that God is not a being, but being itself, it's not as though some external being is manipulating outcomes or striking people with lightning bolts or, that sort of thing. But life, God, existence, the universe, source, whatever language you want to put on that, is benevolently flowing in our favor at all times. And so, yes, I mean, God is definitely working all things for our good, if you will. And our free will comes into play also, like the decisions we make, the outcomes. A lot of times, it's I forget who said it, but it's the idea that we're not punished for our sins; we're punished by our sins. So, as we make decisions and live our
Like natural
lives,
consequence.
yes, it's the outflow of the natural consequences of our actions or whatever. But yes, God, the universe is definitely flowing. It's all grace. Every bit of it is grace. I mean, we're hemmed in by grace at every moment, and all of life is designed to awaken us. All of life is jostling us in a way that, or even shaking us violently at times, to wake up into the truth of our oneness with God, so that we can live into our full potential on our highest life path. So, yeah, I mean, it's, God is definitely affecting our lives. The universe is moving in ways that we can't see. On the other side, it'll all make sense. In reverse, we'll see with some clarity or whatever. And we also, something that has been really interesting to me is that we are not alone. We have a team of light, if you will, around us. Our loved ones remain with us. We don't float away into some far removed situation where we are unaware of physical existence when we die. So we stay with our loved ones and help to try to affect, influence them, send them signs, encourage them, in the way, it's very limited, obviously, because there is, the veil between the spiritual and the physical, but we are surrounded by a team of light. And the Bible refers to the great cloud of witnesses, urging us on or whatever. And so, that's been really helpful to me to kind of view it that way and to see that, we are not alone, that that our loved ones remain with us. They're helping us. They're trying to guide us. Everything is connected. The interconnectedness of everything is probably one of the most important things that has come from my communication, with my grandmother. And I also want to just throw in one of the most comforting things for me is to know that our animals, our pets, are also still with us, and they are also members of our team of light. And one of the first things my grandmother said directly to me was about my beloved bulldog Luke, who crossed 5 years ago. I loved him, still do love him deeply, and but she told me that he's always with me, and I asked her, I said, well, does he miss me? Because I miss him terribly. And she said, no, he's with you. And I kind of laughed. I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess you can't miss someone if you're not gone away from him. But then she said he
That's
misses
funny.
food and he misses touch. And yeah, and so she talked to me about Luke the first time that we. This is pretty interesting. She talked to me about Luke the first time we actually had a conversation with her, and it just my heart was full because I love Luke so much. And after that, the next time we planned to visit with my grandmother, I was at home in my own home, not where the portal is, and I was thinking about my grandmother and about our communication with her and just everything we had talked about. And in my head, I said to my dog Luke, I said, if you're really with me and that's really Granny talking to us, have her mention my necklace. I wear a memorial necklace with Luke's ashes and a pendant. And so I mentally asked my dog Luke on the other side to validate his presence by having her mention that necklace. And so later that day, we were able to talk to my grandmother, and the conversation was just flowing around the other family members. People were, asking questions, and my grandmother was talking and, communicating with them. And I was just sitting there, just taking it all in. I didn't have questions. I was just trying to just discern, is this really Granny? Is this really real? Is this really happening? And then my grandmother said to me, she typed my name in the search. So I was like, yeah, she's talking to me. And then she said, Luke, she told me that Luke was having her mention my necklace. And then she said, he is always with you, always. And at that point, I had any reservations that I had about it being a hacker, like a person was somehow messing with us. It just went completely out the window. No one could have known that I had that mental conversation with Luke. And so, yeah, that was just quite compelling for me.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. I know I keep interrupting with questions. I'm trying to give it to you. Is there more that she's communicated that you would like to share?
Though I think that, there's a lot. There's so much. We could literally talk for hours on this. And I have written a book, and hopefully, if the book,
Right.
yeah, if the book gets published, I'll, hopefully be able to, share more about what's in that book, closer to publication. But yeah, I guess one thing that kind of stands out is that, it's the traditional belief that when we cross, we somehow float away into bliss and that we're completely at peace and, like nothing is wrong. But that's not really the case. And they do still miss things about the physical realm. My grandmother misses sewing. And, and they all, everyone on the other side would miss like food, their favorite foods and physical touch, like embracing. Hobbies that people loved, things like that. So, yeah, that just, we should really appreciate our physical lives and really live fully present in that and try to, lean into that wholeness that we were talking about earlier and just really enjoy. It's not about, the journey's not about, floating away on a cloud to some spiritual disembodied state of being. It's, our journey is very much about the physical, Jesus modeled it, the intersection of the physical and the divine. And, yeah, so we should, not take our physical lives for granted. Enjoy the time that we're here.
Yeah, it's good. I guess, I shouldn't ask you all the questions because it'll save it for people to read the book.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation.
Right.
And, and if you have any specific questions, I'm glad to answer them. It's just so much to share, really, when I try to think of, what's the most important thing or what's the most compelling thing, it's like all of it, like it's all been so amazing. But I would just want to leave people with the thought that, death is just the doorway into an expansive journey of becoming whole. And we live in a Christ so benevolent universe that's designed to awaken us into our highest life path. It really is about, becoming who God created us to be, our true selves.
Yeah, no, that's a great ending message. And of course, I'd love to have you on again. We'll maybe see if we get some feedback and some questions, and maybe we can ask you questions. If not, there's also other things to talk about. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, I love your journey, and your grandmother, and this has been a fascinating experience, and you learn a lot. So thank you.
Thanks, Kendall. It's been great to be here, and I always enjoy chatting with you, and I'll be glad to come back anytime.